Hey everyone, it's Dennis. Today we're going to talk about the OM system OM-3, which is the main camera I've been shooting throughout the majority of 2025. I've had this camera since sometime in March, I think. It was released in February maybe. I didn't pre-order it, but I picked it up just a few weeks after it came out. And so I've been using it for, I don't know, about 9 months-ish. So today I'm going to tell you what I think about it in this long-term review. At its heart, the OM system OM-3 is a modern, reasonably high-end Micro Four Thirds camera with similar guts to the flagship OM-1 camera, but in a retro-style body. And you know, that appeals to me quite a bit. I'm the kind of person, well, I've said this on the channel many times, I prefer small cameras. And while this isn't a small camera per se, it's still smaller than any of the flagship Micro Four Thirds cameras. So it's smaller by a good amount compared to the OM-1 Mark II, and it's also smaller than the Panasonic G9 II, which would be the competing high-end Micro Four Thirds cameras. My hope was that the OM-3 could be the perfect travel camera. Still reasonably compact, but rugged with all the modern features. Paired with a small prime lens, it can be slim and compact, add a grip, and it can accommodate a larger telephoto lens with ease. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the specs of the OM-3. It is, as I said, a reasonably high-end camera with a lot of flagship or near flagship level specs. It has a 20 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor, which is the same resolution as a lot of other Micro Four Thirds cameras. This one, however, is a stacked sensor, like you'd find in a flagship camera like the Nikon Z8 or Z9, which means the sensor has a very fast readout speed, making the camera well suited for sports and action shooting. The retro style body looks like it would be better designed for a slow and methodical shooting style or for street photography, but the camera is actually well suited to fast action and has high burst rates and a blackout free viewfinder. It's got subject detection autofocus modes and over 1,000 AF points. It has 6.5 stops of in-body stabilization, a color profile wheel, various computational photography modes, the list goes on. The EVF is only 2.36 million dots, and the rear screen is a 3-inch, 1.62 million dot panel. The camera uses the large BLX-1 battery, which lasts all day, has USB-C charging, and a single UHS 2 card slot. I'll cover the video specs in the section later on that. Okay, so let's take a look at the body of the OM-3. The first thing you'll notice is that it's a retro-styled camera, recalling the look of classic Olympus film cameras like the OM-1 and its successors from the 1970s. It's a mostly metal body, and you might notice also that it's unusually wide compared to a lot of other mirrorless cameras. The dials and switches are also very tactile and made of metal. It's a pretty slender camera with no grip on the front. That works okay for small prime lenses, but most of the time I use an add-on grip to make it more comfortable with larger lenses. It has an articulating screen, like most cameras do these days. Generally, I do prefer to shoot with a flip-up screen, but for a lot of video use cases, at least for filming yourself, the articulating screen is a little bit better. It's got a nice video and still switch on the left-hand side that lets you go between photo, stills, and slow motion settings, as well as a nice set of custom mode settings on the top wheel. And these are separate for stills and video, C1 through C5 for each. I do use the custom settings quite a bit, especially for video. On the front, you have the color wheel, like the Pen F and the EP7 had, and I don't use that very much at all. I like to shoot RAW all the time. On the rear of the camera, there's no joystick, which some users might miss, especially if you're coming from the OM-1 or another higher end body. But none of my smaller cameras have an AF joystick either. And then you have this nice little toggle switch on the back for switching AF modes and a button for the computational photography modes. And all these buttons are quite customizable, so you can make them do whatever you want. It has USB-C, which is great, as well as mic and headphone jacks, which are also nice. It only has a single card slot. I don't particularly care about having multiple card slots, but some users will feel it's important to them, especially professionals. I feel like this little section on the back of the camera is perhaps plastic, which isn't a big deal, but it's worth calling out. Everything else is all metal. And I'd also call out that for video, it has a tally light, which is also the autofocus illuminator light. Overall, I like the body. It's noticeably bigger than my other Micro Four Thirds cameras. And because it's so wide though, I notice it's sometimes hard to fit in some of the smaller camera bags that I own. Once you put the grip on it, it's bigger again, but I do find it's easier and more comfortable to hold with a grip, so I leave it on most of the time. Obviously, there is a strong aesthetic element to this body design. You either like the retro look or you don't. It works for me, and I like the combination of good looks and highly customizable controls. I've often thought for the kind of photography I do, autofocus has been good enough for a long time. The OM-3 has convinced me otherwise. The autofocus on this camera is absurd, and I'm afraid it's going to turn me into a bird photographer. I've been shooting with increasingly larger and larger telephoto lenses, and I've been having a great time. I see lots of other people at the birding spots with big cameras and lenses, and I feel smug knowing the vintage-looking camera probably outperforms them. The combination of fast burst rates, subject detection AF, and blackout-free shooting work together to help get great bird and animal shots. I do sometimes come back after an afternoon of shooting with 3,000 photos, which does feel a bit extreme. I haven't tested the AF as much for humans, but it's worked well when I've needed it. And I do use the electronic shutter mostly for birding, and then I switch back to the mechanical shutter when shooting people or landscape. I don't make heavy use of the computational modes, but I have used the graduated ND filter mode a fair amount. The high res and live ND filters I've used less and have had mixed results with. I do think there's an element of practice needed to get the most out of them. I've also mentioned I shoot RAW, so I don't ever use the color mode dial at all, like ever. Okay, so let's take a look at some photos I've shot with the OM-3. I've been happy with the image quality of all my 20 megapixel micro four thirds cameras, and this one's no different. In theory, the newer sensor here may have some advantage at higher ISOs compared to the old sensor on my EP7. For the bird photography, I try to shoot at pretty fast shutter speeds, so I have lots of images at ISO 6400, and even some that are good at up to ISO 12800. I think they look fine, and modern AI noise reduction tools can make things look even better. I did borrow a friend's A7R5 for a day and do some side-by-side tests, and sure, 60 megapixels is great for pixel peeping and for tight crops, but I just don't have a real need for it, nor do I want the huge files. The OM-3 does have a high-res pixel shift mode if you need a larger file once in a while. I have had better results with the tripod-based mode over the handheld one, but again, it's probably a matter of practice. Here's some footage I've shot on the OM-3. Video is where the OM-3 breaks my heart. I think every other aspect of this camera meets or exceeds my needs, but while the OM-3 video specs are good on paper, in the real world I feel like it lags behind its peers. Let's start with the things it does well. The camera shoots up to 4K 60p 10-bit with no crop. Autofocus for video is fine, if not class leading, and the IBIS smooths out the footage, although it's definitely not going to replace a gimbal. It has a dedicated stills video slow-mo switch, and you can set up the 5 custom profiles for video shooting separate from the stills ones. You can use this AF illuminator as a tally light, and there's separate headphone and mic input jacks. If you want to use the standard picture profile, you have to shoot 8-bit color, which records in a lower bit rate and is pretty soft. The 10-bit footage is much sharper, but you're forced to shoot in log or HLG mode, which requires color grading after the fact. I find it very difficult to get the color right in post, and OM system doesn't seem to provide any training or education around making the most out of their video modes. Another issue is that the 10-bit footage looks over-sharpened, and there don't seem to be controls to adjust this. In the 8-bit mode, you can dial it down, but not in the 10-bit mode. With practice, maybe I can get better at this, but it is a source of frustration. There is a workaround for all of these issues. If you own an Atomos recorder, the OM-3 can output ProRes RAW, which looks fantastic, and it fixes both the over-sharpening and the color issues. About 2 months ago, DaVinci Resolve released an update to natively support ProRes RAW, so it's also become much easier to edit as well, aside from the huge file size. I actually think it's easier to work in RAW in post than with the 10-bit video. If you're willing to go this route, the OM-3 can look as good as any other camera. So if the Atomos solves all the video problems, what's the issue then? Well, using an external recorder works great for shooting in a dedicated studio setting, but it feels clunky and impractical to use this for travel and casual videography, which are exactly the kinds of things I want to use this camera for. OM system, if you're listening, please release a firmware update allowing the standard picture profiles to work in 10-bit video, and please dial down the sharpening. It is possible that all my gripes are down to a skill issue on my part, but I haven't experienced these kinds of issues using Panasonic V-Log or Sony S-Log, so I don't know. If I find a better workflow for video on the OM-3, I will try to release an updated video going through it. The OM-3 is not a cheap camera, so there are many other options you could get for the same money. There are other retro cameras like the Nikon ZF or the Fuji X-T5. The ZF is too heavy in my opinion, but the X-T5 seems pretty comparable in size. I think it mostly comes down to what system you're invested in. In Micro Four Thirds, Lumix has the G9 Mark II, which would definitely have better video specs than the OM system cameras and similar photo specs, but it's a larger camera body and the aesthetics don't appeal to me personally. Another travel-focused option would be the Sony A7C II. The Sony's similar in size, weight, and features, but it is full frame. Like the Lumix, I would expect the Sony to be stronger in video and be a more practical hybrid camera. I haven't tried any of these other cameras. None of them are cheap, and because I'm invested in Micro Four Thirds glass, the Lumix would be the only system I could practically easily switch to. So what's my conclusion for the OM system, OM-3? To be honest, I'm conflicted. I've had a blast using it for photography. It meets almost 100% of my photography needs. And it looks good doing it, and it's a joy to use. I'm quite happy with the images I've captured in the last 9 months. It's the most professional camera I've owned since moving away from full-frame DSLRs. But I don't know that it meets all my needs as a video camera, so maybe I'll have another system for that. Having 2 camera bodies makes plenty of sense for professional work, but I'm not a working professional. For travel, what I really wanted was one camera that could do everything. So maybe I'm still looking, maybe I need to keep practicing. We'll see. So those were my thoughts on the OM-3. Please share your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again. Bye.